Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am your host, and we're here today to talk about some draft prospects. It's been a minute, been focusing on free agency and things like that. So, going to talk about our top 10 safeties in the upcoming 2022 draft class. And joining me to do that are my guys, Alex and Tyler. Alex, we'll start with you, man. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Ready to talk safeties. We're 1 month away from the NFL draft now. Caught up pretty quickly after 2 weeks of euphoria and free agency. We're back to doing the rankings, so that's always fun.
Yeah, man, I can't believe that it's just a month away. I mean, it's both bittersweet, right? Because we got to start the draft process later, but now I feel like we have to rush and catch up. But obviously, I would much rather cover a team that goes 9-8 and is in the playoff hunt all through December and January, as opposed to being 3-9 or whatever, and only focusing on draft stuff. So, there's pros and cons for sure. Tyler, speaking of the draft, you invested in some new draft gear, or gear for the draft, I should say. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. I bought myself a pair of shoes and a jacket. There's bright yellow, or I guess gold in it. So you'll be able to hear me from wherever you guys are in the country for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Arjun is going to be there as well. So the three of us are going to have a great time in Las Vegas. And so if you are attending the draft, be sure to come say hi, and we'll chat it up. So that being said, we're going to dive right into our rankings today. And if you are watching this, of course, or participating, you can see the ticker down below. Our rankings, as always, are brought to you by our friends over at ExpressVPN, where you can go to expressvpn.com/guilty to start your free trial of a VPN today. That, of course, helps with computer security. It gives you access to NFL Game Pass International, which is far superior than the US version. Also lets you access Netflix and Hulu and all that stuff on their international packages. So go check that out. All right, so we are going to do our safety rankings today. We'll go from 10 to 7, and then 6 through 4, and then 3 to 1. And at the end, we'll kind of talk about really where we see the Chargers kind of investing in this position group. I think it is kind of an underrated need. And especially if Brandon Staley is going to be, focusing in on the dime package and things like that. So let's start with Tyler. Tyler, why don't you take us through your 10 through 7 first?
Alrighty. By almost default, because I hated the two other safeties that I watched that didn't make this list, we have Leon O'Neal from Texas A&M. At number 9, we have Kirby Joseph from Illinois. At 8, JT Woods from Baylor. And then Nick Cross from Maryland at 7. At this point, the 7 and 8, JT Woods, Nick Cross and JT Woods, those are guys that I'm just kind of hoping reach their ceiling. JT Woods being more the athlete. I think Nick Cross being a real hit or miss player, like a real hit or miss player. But I'm hoping that with that super athleticism as well, if you can get him to do consistently what he does well with that RAS score, I think he could be good. When his instincts are dead on, they're dead on. And he can be an enforcer. I've seen him knock 2 different players from 2 different games, or 1 player per game, out of the game in those games. He could definitely can do that and be that for you. I think when he does make a great play on the football, he does make a great play on the football. But the negatives are, he can be lost in coverage 1v1. Sometimes it looks great.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's absolutely getting torched by Jahan Dotson on a double move against Penn State. He's an inconsistent tackler, but I think with that RAS score, with what he does well, I'm putting him at 7, but it is a bit of a projection for sure. But again, I don't feel really good about Kirby Joseph or Leon O'Neal. JT Woods, I definitely like, kind of in that same vein. So the 7 and 8 are kind of a toss-up for me.
Yeah, Nick Cross from Maryland is a really interesting study to me. He kind of reminded, we got Mama Shun already in here with a super chat. Shout out. Nick Cross really kind of reminded me of a souped up version of Divine Diablo, like somebody that I think is probably best suited to be like that 6th dime linebacker, box safety. So I do think he's a little bit pigeonholed into playing exclusively in the box. But, you mentioned that RAS score, man, 9.91, which I think is like 3rd in this safety class, a strong safety, I should say, based off of how they sort the website. Just a really physical player. I think he's one of the bigger safeties But
Mhm.
you know, I watched a couple of games and I'm like, oh, like there's some really inconsistent tackling tendencies, and then sure enough, you go and look at the numbers, and there's really high missed tackle rate. So there's definitely some things he's got to clean up. He's definitely some things that uh, you know, Tyler mentioned the issues in coverage as well. I think if you draft him, you bet on the athleticism, you bet on the traits, and then you realize that you're probably getting a specialist player. You're not going to get like a true versatile chess piece that you can play deep, that you can play in the slot, that you're probably only playing him in the box. And so if you are a defense that has that kind of role, you know, I think that like the Seattle cover 3 scheme where you bring in that 6 safety, that would be a really good spot for him, i.e. Adrian Phillips or Rayshawn Jenkins when he was, you know, early in his career. But man, like he's a freak athlete for sure.
If I had to compare him, this is an awful comparison, but I mean, if Aloha Gilman can go in the 6th, I think he can go in the 4th, I guess.
Yeah.
Ringing endorsement.
Ringing endorsement. I don't really feel good about some of these safeties, man.
Yeah, I think when you go, Steven was kind of talking about this in the chat earlier, but I feel like 1 to 8, there's like a pretty high degree of athleticism on my list. And then 9, 10, and honorable mentions are a little tougher, just because you're kind of betting on guys that I think have high end like skill sets in play, maybe high end like tape, but aren't the most athletic. And that's kind of what you're looking for in the safety position, but not necessarily all the time. So I'll go through my 10 to 7. I actually have 2 Virginia players on this list. I have at number 10, Nick Grant, safety from Virginia, and then number 9, Joey Blunt, also a super senior from Virginia. At number 8, I have Verone McKinley, and at number 7, I have Brian Cook. So Verone McKinley was kind of the most interesting one for me to watch, because I sort of thought watching him like, this guy doesn't have like an NFL body at all. And like he's pretty short, undersized, short arms, and you kind of like you know, when you watch the tape though, he doesn't really like play that way. Obviously has like great ball instincts, kind of like moves all around the field, has pretty great acceleration. Obviously, I think during the combine he only did a couple of events, did not do the 40-yard dash. Did the bench press and vertical jumps. So, you know, his speed kind of like as far as the combine, you know, not great evaluation on that. But in terms of what you see in game speed, I think that he just, you know, he has a lot of that kind of pop to him. And also just, you know, we talk about tacklers, and I think that's a really important part of evaluating safeties as well. And he's a very willing tackler. And that's something that I think shines through on the film as well when you watch it. He's a guy that really has all the traits, playing traits that you want in a safety. But I do think the reason that he's at 8 and not higher for me is that size, because I do think that is kind of going to be a problem in the NFL. And while he's a very willing tackler, he can also be somewhat of an inefficient tackler at times because of those short arms. And that gives me some pause when it's like, oh, you know, we're going to ask this guy to try to tackle Derrick Henry, like, or someone like that,
Sure.
at, you know, at the second level or something like that. So I am a little bit concerned about his size. Sometimes he can get overpowered if there's like a bigger receiver, for example. So I do love the traits, and I think, you know, he would do pretty well at the NFL level, but ultimately he's probably a late day 2, early day 3 kind of guy because of his, you know, size and stature.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there, and I do think, you know, he could be a fit for the Chargers. Obviously, we know that they've met with him, kind of fits what they want to do, and I think, you know, Alex is spot on here because like mentally he's got everything that you want and you could possibly want a safety. He understands route concept, he understands how to anticipate and drive on the ball. He's got those great ball skills. There's a couple of his interceptions over the course of his career have just been crazy good catches. Like there was one in 2019. I want to say against Washington State with Kyler Gordon, I want to say, where he was kind of in the corner of the end zone. It was tipped and he like barely got 1 foot down. Of course, you need 2 in the NFL, but in college, you just need the 1. And so he's just got really good balance and ball skills. And I think, you know, he could be a good fit for the Chargers, but absolutely because of his frame, athleticism, I think he is kind of a day 3 guy, but I really like the player for sure.
So I didn't get a chance to watch him because I figured, okay, they watched McKinley. I'll find somebody else. Maybe I really like to talk about them. Did not happen. So I completely wasted my time on that one. But the Chargers obviously met with him. So you say he's a good fit for what they want to do. So what do you think they will do with him, and how does he compete or compare to Gilman and Mark Webb?
Yeah, I think, the difference there between those two is that he would be more of the deep safety player. So I think what the Chargers do at safety is going to be really interesting to me because, down the stretch, they really hinted at, allowing Nasir Adderley to play more around the box, move him around, be a Derwin light kind of player. And so to me, like if your goal is to allow both of those two players play around the ball more often, you need that deep safety kind of player. And so that really is the difference. Like I think Alohi Gilman and Mark Webb are interesting prospects, but they're limited athletically. They're limited in their ball skills and their range, really just in kind of their understanding of how to be that center fielder kind of player. And that's why I think somebody like Verone McKinley can come in and be a good fit for this team because it allows him to play deep. Derwin and Nas can play in the box. They can play at the line of scrimmage more often. And so really that's just kind of the skill set that I think the Chargers are missing because Nas can play deep, but he's really the only, I mean, Derwin can do everything, right? But you don't want Derwin playing deep. You want Derwin around the box. So I think the Chargers do need to add another kind of deep safety. And I think McKinley would be a fit there.
Yeah, I think McKinley would kind of be a fit there. And if you do have him at deep safety, I think that kind of works with his limitations in a way because you don't have to have him, necessarily playing a lot of run defense snaps or stuff like that on the field. And Derwin can be more of your physical attacker like that anyway, as far as the defense is concerned. So I think McKinley would blend in pretty well there. Obviously, the question I think with the safety group is if they draft a safety super high, let's say first or second round, what does that mean for Nasir Adderley? What does that mean kind of for the rest of these guys? But I think McKinley is a guy where you could still have Adderley there and, kind of work with that group still the same anyway.
Yeah. Cool. And I do think they have to be proactive in that regard, but not like too proactive. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird balance because, we were having a conversation about like maybe you trade back and maybe you get a Daxton Hill or one of these other guys in this class early. But then it's like, okay, but that's just the same kind of trend that we've been seeing where they draft these players and they don't keep them unless they're first round picks. So it's a balance at the safety position this year for the Chargers. All right. So I have my list here. Again, kind of like my default, like the other guys. I think he's not the best athlete, but at number 10, I'm going to have Smoke Monday from Auburn. Number 9, I do have McKinley there. And then 8, I have Nick Cross. And then 7, Kirby Joseph. So this group is not necessarily my favorite. I mentioned a little bit of we talked about McKinley. So I'll talk about Smoke Monday as somebody that I think probably not that fit for the Chargers, but did kind of give me Jerron Kearse light kind of vibes. I think he is a bigger, more physical kind of safety, not necessarily the best athlete. His RAS score, I think, is like 6.7 or something like that. So nothing great there, but I think mentally and just kind of his attitude, I think is something that teams will really like in the NFL draft. I think his calling card really is that willingness to come into the box and put his nose into the scrum and really just be that physical presence. He also was pretty surprisingly good in coverage, was able to kind of flip his hips and keep up with some tight ends, use that length that I think is a good calling card. So these teams are going to be looking for these special teams contributors in day 3, these guys who can come in and be that, 4th, 5th safety and, not be afraid of that role. And I think Smoke Monday is good for that. Again, not really a fit for what the Chargers are looking for. But really just like when you get to this point, you're either taking a shot on the mentality of a player like that, the swagger, if you will, or kind of the physical profile. And so, Smoke Monday, I think is, in general, like I said, not for the Chargers, but in general, a good dart throw on day 3 for the safety position.
Yeah, okay. And I'll say the other thing about Smoke Monday, just in general, like he isn't the most athletic. Like I think he tested sort of below average or average when it came to the speed categories in RAS, but he did play a little bit faster, like on tape to me, and you still have that size. That's very prototypical of what teams would want in a starting safety or at least something like that. So for me, as far as dart throws, he's one of the better physical profile dart throws, like you said.
A lot of physical profile speedster sort of guys in this safety group, it seems. Kirby Joseph, man, I don't know. For me, it really came down to, I don't know if you felt the same way. So I had him at 9, so I don't dislike him. And I think him being at 9 is nice. I'm okay with that. But to me, the tackling mentality is really what kept him low on my list. To me, it's not just, again, don't go make the tackle. Just let the guy come to you. Let the running back, the receiver catch them. And that's not really what you want to see from a safety. That's what knocked him down for me. I don't know how you feel about that in particular, or why was he at 7 for you?
Yeah, totally understand that. I did knock him down for his tackling score is pretty low for me. Just not somebody that is super willing in that regard. And I think, he's somebody that's going to be pigeonholed into a specific scheme, and really it's a scheme that's kind of dying. And like, if he were, coming into the Seattle cover 3 scheme, I think he would be kind of high on draft boards, because he does have that range, that burst, that closing speed, those ball skills that you really like. You really like his ability in coverage and to be that playmaker back there. But I do agree about the tackling. I just think, when you're looking at kind of players like Verone Mckinley, kind of smoke physically, Nick Cross. So really the debate here for me was Joseph at 7 and Cross at 8. But Cross is also limited, but he's more of like that box linebacker, box safety. So to me, I think you place a higher value on the ball skills and the ability to be a playmaker back there. So I mean, I don't feel great about him at 7, but just kind of the ball production, it was really the trait there that I decided to give the edge over.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, 6 through 4 now.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, at number 6, I have Brian Cook from Cincinnati. At 5, I have Jalen Petre, that's how you say his name, from Baylor. And then at number 4, I have Lewis Seen, the safety from Georgia. I like all 3 of these guys. It was tough for me to find a way to get to fit this. Like, Cook at 6 feels good, but 5 through 2 I think was really, really close. Cook, to me, even though maybe statistically it isn't going to be the best game ever, I thought his game versus Alabama might have just been the most impressive because of what he had to do. You watched him, like even Lewis Seen, who had a really good game against Alabama, he had a really good game until he didn't, and until Jameson Williams just torched him on that one play. Brian Cook had to run and keep up with someone like Williams, like Mechie, and keep track of these guys. And I think his understanding of route concepts, I think it was just fantastic. He did a really, really good job either as a safety or in single coverage. He's a classic football guy. And I think, all of that, I know how I feel about him in coverage. I think his best trait is how he tackles, or at least the fact that he is a good tackle. I think, his, at least some misses, sure, but his mentality is there. Unlike some of these guys behind him, I think that mentality is absolutely there. So to me, pretty good in coverage, smart guy, good football player, good tackler. To me, just only really limited by his athleticism. To me, he's not, quite the lunch pail, blue collar classic guy, but he's, I just think there's going to be something limiting there that I don't think, he just won't be able to reach a great ceiling, but I think his floor is very, very solid. So I think he does the dirty work well. I think he's a very smart player, and I really like him.
Yeah, he's number 6 for me as well. And cool. I tweeted about this. He really does remind me of Terrell Burgess, somebody that's just really solid, can do everything that you want, but not necessarily be like that great athlete. What really kind of sold me on Cook, I watched his Notre Dame game first. And in that Notre Dame game, he's being asked to cover, I forget his name, but their tight end, their big tight end, number 87, one-on-one situations, and really did a fantastic job there, both in off coverage and press situations. Then he's also being asked to, drive on overpasses from to Kevin Austin, who's kind of that freak athlete. So really versatile in coverage, and really just has a great understanding of how to flip his hips, when to jam, when not to jam, has great ball skills, has great anticipation. So he's just really smart and heady. And I think he's not necessarily, like you said, into that blue collar, sleeper kind of category yet, but he's got those same kind of traits. And I think he is just really smart and is able to really just have a high understanding of plays and when to make them. And I'm a big fan of him, and like I said, I have him at 6'2", and that feels right. Like that feels like the separation of the tier before, and so I really like the player, but I don't think he has the same kind of upside as the other guys.
Yeah, I like Brian Cook too. I had him at 7, of course. So yeah, him and Kobe Bryant kind of just stand out from that Cincinnati secondary in general.
Yeah,
Although I guess more so than Bryant, I think Cook is a little bit more scheme specific. Like I think you probably need to put him potentially in like a zone heavy scheme. You can
sure.
kind of do that with him. There's a lot of interesting things you could do. I just think because of the lack of athleticism, and this is sort of the same thing I said about like Verone Mckinley, I think he'll probably be pigeonholed at least early in his NFL career, and then kind of they'll open him up later if he does really start to develop. But that's the case with a lot of the guys from 6 to 10, like we said before you start getting into the athletic freak shows. But I will go from 6 to 4 now. I do have Kirby Joseph at 6. At number 5, I have Lewis Seen, and then I have Jaquan Brisker at number 4. I guess I'll talk a little bit about Kirby Joseph just because I came away with a slightly different interpretation of him. I definitely think the tackling thing is bad. So that was kind of one of the things that came up on tape, the fact that he just kind of like ducks his head. I will say I think that's one of the more correctable things at the NFL level, I guess, though. Like for years, I mean, Chargers specific, Michael Davis was like awful at tackling. And then he became, I think really improved, as he got into the league, really his second or third year. That's kind of when he started to become a little bit better. And I think you just kind of like bet on a guy with some of that athleticism as well to be able to learn that, especially with how he's able to kind of like swing his hips and how he's able to just kind of get in position to tackle. I don't feel like it should be that hard to teach him, but then again, there's some guys that just come into the league and they're the same player they were in college, so maybe there won't be that development. But I think the amount of burst that he has and the ability to make plays on the ball obviously is kind of like shut down in coverage when it comes to the slot and stuff like that. I think and his movements are just really like off the chain as well. Like I've never seen a guy just like who's there's obviously been corners and safeties who can like swing their hips really fast, but he's pretty good at it. And I think that that's one of the interesting things about watching him on tape as well. So the athleticism is there for me enough to overlook the tackling, but I do think the tackling thing is a red flag, and that's why he wouldn't go higher than 6 for me, but I understand why the tackling thing would knock him down to 9 for you guys.
Yeah, I think that it's always fun to see these kind of disagreements, right? And I think we were kind of messaging back and forth, and I don't know where Tyler has him, but Lewis, you mentioned Lewis Cine, right, Tyler?
Yeah, he's at number 4 for me.
Okay, so Alex kind of messaged this and started this conversation in the group chat about Lewis Cine being the perceived number 2 safety. There's a couple media members out there that think that he should be the first safety taken. So I know it's just kind of crazy, man. These takes a little bit. So I'm a little lower on Kyle Hamilton, but not that low. So Alex, talk to me about your kind of evaluation of Lewis Seen, because you were the one really to start that conversation in our group message.
Yeah, I guess the difference between Brisker, Hill, Hamilton, and then Seen for me was just Seen was like, I didn't feel like his ball skills were there. Like I felt like if he was asked to make more plays on the ball, maybe he would have. But I kind of needed to see it like I did from Hamilton and Petre and some of these other guys. So that's kind of what knocked him down for me. And then there's just like really boring snaps, like Steven said, where he's like, okay, he's lining up at edge here and didn't really make an effective play there, but okay. So I think there's definitely a physical skill set that you can have for their like day one. He comes in and I think would be like a really good run defender, like fills the gap super well in that regard. I just don't know if his ceiling is as high as some of the other guys, and that's why I ended up putting him at 5. But yeah, just I don't know. I can't put him like in Kyle Hamilton tier. Like that's just kind of crazy to me. I know some people are higher or lower on him, but I just don't think the same level of athleticism is quite there. But at the same time, he did have a good combine, relatively speaking, so I'm sure that moved him up a couple boards. But yeah, I wasn't as thrilled with like the ball skills and playmaking, but maybe if you're looking at that from a Chargers perspective, they don't necessarily need that from day one, whereas they do need run defense. So that, kind of could potentially make him an option. Obviously, they don't have a second round pick, so pretty unlikely, but never know.
I think he's going to be one of those guys where what did you want to talk about, Scene?
Go ahead, Tyler.
I think he's going to be one of those guys where once he gets to the NFL, everyone's going to be wondering, well, where was this ball production in college? And to me, thankfully, like to me, maybe the different games watched, of course, like he didn't get his hands on all that much, and there weren't a ton of opportunities on what I saw. But I think the way he uses his burst and his speed, he knows he can play off of receivers a lot more than some other guys because he's just that twitchy. And I think quarterbacks kind of backed off because they knew that he could close in an instant. And I think even that same burst, that same closing speed is shown from how far back he's asked to blitz. I think he was only blitzed 11 times, and he had 0 pressures on the year, but he blitzed from way back. I think they asked him to blitz him really, really far back. So, I think he's going to get his hands on more passes in the pros just naturally, but also I think he's got some sort of twitch and athleticism and upside to him that does give him a very high ceiling. So I think once he does get to the pros, I think he's going to make some quarterbacks pay.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, Lewis Cine has a 9.9 RAS score. So like the man tested like a freak. And I think that does show up on tape. It's just that the understanding jump coverage is not there. I do have him higher. I have him at 3. So, spoiler alert, but I think his ability to drive on the ball is really kind of the best in this class, and outside of Kyle Hamilton. So I think that those athletic traits do show up on tape, and his range, man, his mentality. I think he absolutely is a little inexperienced in coverages. And I mean, you watch his tape against Kentucky, and the man's doing nothing. Like the man is chilling 20 yards back and gets like 0 action thrown his way. He just teams would not throw the ball down. If you don't like our assessments, then go watch somebody else, Agent Soto. So,
I will say one thing regarding Scene, and this is from a 2020 clip where he goes up against Kyle Pitts and just lays like one of the biggest hits I've ever seen on him, gets ejected for it. Pretty nasty. So like, from that perspective, I will say just like the kind of mean streak he plays with. We talk about that with offensive linemen, but I almost think he plays with like a mean streak and, just kind of not being afraid to hit guys. That might get him into trouble at the next level with how the NFL is dealing with, head injuries and stuff like that. But I do think he is in general, a big hitter. So that's one of the things that even though maybe he doesn't have that perceived like athleticism on the field compared to some of these other guys, I do think that would kind of like move him up for me.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of his athletic traits, man. Like the guy can close in a hurry, and I do think you can work on his understanding of what coverages and being able to reroute people and handle the over routes and things like that. So it's a little work in progress, and I get that, but I think he's just a cleaner safety evaluation than some of these other guys that I do happen to like. So, like I said, I have Cook at 6. And then I have Jalen Petre at 5, the safety from Baylor, and then Daxton Hill at 4. So I feel like Daxton Hill is going to be. I feel like Daxton Hill is really going to be the disagreement. And I will say that in terms of like being a cover safety, I think Daxton Hill has the highest ceiling in that regard. I just don't think he has the kind of ball skills. I don't think he has the kind of athletic traits to make that big jump and be an all-around safety. So this is kind of like the difference for me. Like I think Lewis Cine has the flashes, has the traits to become a truly all-around safety, whereas these other guys I just don't see that. I really like Jalen Petre, man. Like Jalen Petre was asked to do so many different things for Baylor. Like this man is setting the edge at times. He's playing the run. He's covering the slot. He's covering tight ends. He's matching up man-to-man. And I think there is a lot to like there. But if really like the difference in becoming a truly all-around safety is kind of what I'm looking for. That's why those guys are not as high as Lewis Cine. So as it pertains to Daxton Hill in particular, I just don't see the kind of dog mentality that I'm really looking for from the safety position. I think he is a fantastic cover safety option, I just don't see that happening. So Moose Starway asking about Petrie. I do think he is a safety for me. If you want to list him as a nickel corner, I totally understand that. But I think ideally for Petrie, you're asking him to do, kind of that nickel DB role where you're playing some off coverage, you're doing the slot, you're doing other things like that. Thank you for whoever blocked that clown. So I do like Jalen Petrie a lot. And I understand it if you want him in this slot, but to me, I think he's a safety. I think you want him off the ball a little bit more, be able to read and react, use his mentality and things like that. So I'm a fan of his, but I think he's a safety for me.
Oh man, Dax. Okay, so darn it, I thought I was gonna be the one who was high on Lewis Sean here. So I was like, I really wanted to put him ahead of Daxton Hill. So I'm proud of you for doing that, taking that. I don't want to say risk. I don't think it's super controversial, but I feel like everyone has Daxton Hill penciled in as that number 2. And I don't know if that's the best. Like people are talking about, I was talking about like Trayvon Merrick, from last year. Everyone's saying, Hill and Merrick, like they're the same 1v1, kind of cover corner. I'm like, Merrick allowed fewer yards in 2 years than Hill allowed this past season. Like just purely off of that alone, I don't see it. I don't see the same kind of guy, and Hill to be safety. Like I get Hill being safety too. I completely understand that. Anywhere between 2 and 4, I totally get. And I think he's such an animal, dropping into zone and attacking the ball carrier, or making play on the football or whatever. High IQ, can play anywhere. But yeah, I get it. Like I get, I have him at 3, so it's not like I have him at number 2 either. So I think we have the same 2 then. Yeah, I was so worried about how often he got caught with his back to the quarterback. And if you want a guy who's gonna be the second best prospect in your group, for him to go against Penn State, for him to go against Ohio State and struggle as much as he did, and again give up 456 yards in college, as just the second best safety prospect, I don't know. But I understand what people would have him at 2. I think he does have that high ceiling. I totally get that he could affect the game of football so much because you can put him anywhere. And that is very, very valuable, especially in today's NFL. To me, seeing just to me being only a deep safety, in my opinion, and Hill being able to play everywhere, Hill just affecting the game more, I put him higher. But I completely understand why you put Sean above him. And again, that's awesome. I think it's a really good call.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think Hill's pro the cover, man, and Craig pointed out he's more of a corner than a safety. I think that's fine. I think he does have that kind of matchup one-on-one, ability, but he was 16th on our composite rankings for, play-to-play basis and, impacting the game. So I just want to see him impact things more. And he's not an outside corner. I don't think he's purely a slot guy. Like I do want him to do safety things. And really like all these guys 2 through 5 for me, they're all so close. It really is just kind of, like I said, I'm looking for more of like the all around safety types. And I do think that Hill is more of a cover, like exclusively a cover guy. Like, I don't know if I really want him being up in the box, playing the run, or, being on the nickel consistently. I think he's a little bit more limited than the other guys. And so that's why I have him at 4 as opposed to in my top 3.
One final thing on the composite rankings. I think he gave up the most snaps per reception. No, he had the fewest snaps per reception, which means he gave up a reception more regularly than any of the 27 safeties that we charted. Like that's just a fact. And you have to consider that when ranking him. So yeah.
Yeah, I struggled with the Daxton Hill ranking. I did end up putting him in my top 3. We'll figure out where he ends when we, do 3 to 1. But I don't know, like yeah, like Tyler said, I think the versatility there is enough for me to put him over someone like Sean. In a way, he's kind of like a bit of the souped up version of like Nasir Adderley, where it's like, okay, he can kind of do a bunch of these things. I think you can have him at nickel and safety. You could kind of put him wherever you wanted, really. But at the same time, he does get burned and picked on sometimes, partially because of his size. And if you look at his RAS score, there's one column that's just fully yellow and one column that's fully green. And that kind of shows up on tape when you watch Daxton Hill in some of these bigger games. So I do think that he is kind of maybe a little limited, like Steven says, at the next level. But for me, I think the potential there, I think the ceiling is kind of why I still have him there despite some of the problems.
All right, Tyler, let's get your top three.
Alrighty, so at number 3, I have Daxton Hill. At number 2, I have Jaquan Brisker, if that's how you say his name. At the number 1, I have Kyle Hamilton. I don't want to take Steven's Brisker thing, so I'm going to let him have him at number 2. We did just talk about Daxton Hill. I'm going to talk about Kyle Hamilton because I am still, I've mentioned this before, I like him. He has a first round grade for me, but I think it's at like a 7, which for us for me is the cutoff for a first round grade. I think he's good at everything. I think he's generally good at everything. But then again, the notion, now I do think he is ahead of everybody else in the safety group, obviously. But the notion that he is one of the best players in this draft, like should be one of the 3 best players in this draft, is kind of bonkers to me. And I think it's very easy for people to say, oh, Derwin James. Oh, Derwin James. Everyone's trying to compare this safety to Derwin James. I don't think he was a better prospect than Owusu Koromoa, to be completely honest. I think JOK was a more, angry tackler and a better 1v1 coverage corner or safety, I guess, in my opinion. Now, he went on to play linebacker, I think, for the Browns. That's different. Hamilton, I think, will play safety or be more of a defensive back, I guess. But I don't know, man. Like, what if people are comparing him to Derwin James, what is he close to Derwin James, even out of college? As I don't know. And then to me, to have him better potentially than Aiden Hutchinson, I think is a little bit ridiculous. I don't understand where that's coming from. And again, it's not the end all be all, but if you want to be like Aiden Hutchinson is considered, maybe the best player, one of the best players in this draft. And he was number 1 in our composite edge rankings. Like, you want to see something like that to just kind of check that box, right? Evan Neal, maybe the top tackle. He was, top 3 in our composite rankings. Kyle Hamilton came in at 9th among safeties. And again, Hamilton plays different competition than, Yusuf Corker or whatever from Kentucky, or maybe he doesn't. But, I just don't buy him as one of the best players in this draft. With that said, one of the top 3 best players in this draft. With that said, he's going to have a first round grade for me. I'm pretty sure the whole way. He's going to be one of the only maybe the 15 players that have that for me. I just don't buy him there. Number 1 for me, first round grade. I just don't buy him in the same tier as some of these upper tier guys.
I think we're all on the same page there because like Kyle Hamilton, I think he is the best safety. I think he is a top 15, 20 player in the class. He has a low first round grade for me as well. And again, that's not 32 players are going to have a first round grade like Tyler is saying. But
right.
I think that the Derwin comparison for me only applies for like his ability to be like a matchup guy against tight ends. Because he's really the only player in this safety class that has the size, the coverage ability, the understanding to say, okay, I'm going to go put Kyle Hamilton on Kyle Pitts, on Darren Waller, on Travis Kelce. So that is the only instance where I'm like, okay, I can understand that specific thing. But I mean, as we all know, Derwin is a freak of nature and can do everything well at the safety position. And I don't think that's the case for Kyle Hamilton. I really like the player. But top 3 player in the class is a little rich for me, and I'm still hearing like his name being thrown around with the Houston Texans quite often, and I'd rather have to take one of the pass rushers, one of the offensive tackles, trade back. I can't see that being, if I were a Texans fan, taking Kyle Hamilton at 3 would just not be what I would want.
Yeah, I think when people compare him to Derwin, I just don't think he's as fluid a mover as Derwin is. Like, I think he's a little bit more stiff, and that kind of shows up on tape. For example, in the Cincinnati game where he kind of got burnt by some slot receivers a few times.
Alec Pierce got him on a couple go routes too.
Oh yeah, and so the comparison that other people bring up for him is also my guy Isaiah Simmons pretty frequently, and I sort of, I don't know. I guess I think that athletically he is pretty similar, but I also don't think at the next level he's going to be able to play kind of as many positions around the field, I do think he'll sort of be boxed into safety a little bit. The Cardinals are in like year 3 of Isaiah Simmons, and they still don't know really how to use him, which is really concerning to me with how they've played their linebackers and safeties over there. But I just feel like, I don't know. I sort of sell the Kyle Hamilton to Derwin James comparison, although I can see that more. But I think whenever, a lot of these defensive coordinators are just going to be like, this is going to be our jack of all trades guy. I think that's a little bit easier said than done, especially because I don't think he's quite as athletic as an Isaiah Simmons or Derwin James personally. So that's why I have him at number 1. I feel like we're shitting on Kyle Hamilton, and then we're like, he's also the best player in the safety room. That is kind of the funny thing. But yeah, so my top 3, I have Jalen Petre from Baylor at number 3. I have number 2, Daxton Hill. I have number 1, Kyle Hamilton. I've already talked about Hamilton and Hill. I'll talk a little bit about Jalen Petre, but I just thought that, he was one of the better ball hawk guys that I kind of watched in this class, and obviously can play man-to-man really well. I showed that in a lot of like Big 12 games. He kind of reminds me a little bit of like Buda Baker in sort of how he plays.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that a lot from him, just in terms of like how he finishes his tackles and sort of how he's willing to be a bit more physical and like throw his body around, in the Buda Baker way of like not shying away from, DK Metcalf or something like that, and willing to be aggressive all the time. I really like that from him. Not the best, like physical specimen, I would say. I actually don't know how he like physically compares to like Buda Baker, but he does have kind of like smaller hands, a little bit smaller arms too. And so that will kind of be the knock against him. But I just think he does everything well that you want to see at the next level in terms of like tackling, that I think you can sort of, you don't need to have like him be like a freak RAS guy with top end speed like all the time. I think everything else that he does on the field is just really good. And I think the fact that he can play man and he can play deep and he can play zone, I think that just makes him so much more versatile to an NFL defense, to potentially Brandon Staley as well if the Chargers were to go after him. Not that I think they will, but I think that he's and there's, it's not just like, oh, he had this year and that was it. Like he's been at this level kind of for a while at Baylor. Whether you watch a game from 2020, you watch a game from 2021, he's kind of been the same player but slowly getting better throughout. So I just love how he, we talked about tackling. I love how he tackles, love how he plays all around the field. And I think he can kind of be that like Buda Baker like safety for a team. And for that, I have him at number 3.
Yeah, I love that comparison, Alex. I had not thought of that one. So I think he's a little bit bigger than Buda, but very similar physical profiles for sure. I think if the Chargers did have a second round pick, he's somebody that I would be really interested in, because I think he solves a lot of different problems that the Chargers have. I think he adds some athleticism in the secondary. He boosts the run game. I mean, like I said, this man was setting the edge for Baylor and chasing down running backs from the backside. So there's a lot to like for Jalen Petre, and I do think that he would be a good fit for the Chargers for sure.
Yeah, I love Petre. So I watched Tyson Anderson from Toledo, who had 0 interceptions, 0 pass breakups. Or even if you watch Lewis Seen, you have to appreciate what he could do, but there's no real production there. Petre, just read it off: 25 pressures, 2 sacks, 50 run stops, 2 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, 6 pass breakups. I mean, you just turn on the tape and it's just fun. I could see why any fan of any team would just fall in love with this guy. He's fun. He's all over the place. He can do quite a bit. I rewatched because I heard that he had taken a big step forward at the Senior Bowl, and people were really saying he did a fantastic job. That must have been in team drills or maybe even the game. I wasn't really impressed with the one-on-ones because it's like, oh, there's Bo Melton beating him, or there's Khalil Shakir beating him. And I was like, I don't know where the step forward was, but supposedly he was one of the big winners. So it must have been team drills. It must have been during the game or something. But yeah, he's an awesome player for sure. Yeah,
I also wonder how much of that is like people don't watch Baylor and then they watch this guy. So I feel like there's an effect for, not that Baylor's a small school, but compared to the true like blue bloods, I feel like that does kind of have an effect.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we'll wrap this up with my three. Lewis Cine at number 3, like I said, and then I have Jaquan Brisker at number 2, also, and then Kyle Hamilton at number 1. So Brisker became a really favorite of mine when I was watching him on Saturday afternoon, or actually it was Friday night, excuse me. And then I tweeted out the mock draft of the Chargers training down and taking him in the first round. Which was definitely a joke, was not serious at all. I do not think taking a safety in the first round would be smart. But I do really, really like Brisker. And like, throughout this show, I think when you're looking for these all around safeties, I think Brisker has the chance to really be that. And, I've seen some comments that he's only a box safety, that he's a little limited. And I just don't really agree with that at all. He tested like really, really well, not as high as, Lewis Cine, who had a 9.9, but he had a 9.05 RAS score, which is really good. 6'1", 200 pounds. So he really kind of checks every kind of physical box that you can really see. And Penn State did align him as a deep safety on occasion, never a true like center fielder, but he was asked to do those things. And I think his ball skills are fantastic. Really can be seen, breaking up passes at a really high level. I think he had 7 pass breakups this past season for Penn State. And he also had the 5th most run stops among safeties in the Big Ten. Not just, draft eligible safeties in the Big Ten, but all big safeties in the Big Ten. So somebody that I think is productive against the pass, productive against the run, can really check all these boxes, is a high-end athlete, not elite athlete, but a high-end. I would like to see him be a little bit more decisive with diagnosing routes, because when he does drive on the ball, I really, really like what I see. Yes. And I think he does have that mentality, like I said, to really just close a gap in a hurry and go separate the ball from a receiver is something that he does really, really well. And then really kind of what sold me is just his ability to affect the run game as a deep safety and come up and just make plays in space and get a tackle for loss against Iowa, get a tackle for loss against Wisconsin. And so for me, I think he's just the best case scenario. If you're missing out on Kyle Hamilton, like he's the best case scenario of finding a truly all-around guy that can affect the pass, affects the run, gets tackles for loss, has that mentality to put his note to, get into the scrums, be that willing tackler and affect the game in just a variety of ways. So Jaquan Brisker was somebody I really, really liked. He is a personal favorite of mine. We are going to do like a My Guy episode later on in the process. And Brisker is definitely a my guy in this class. I love Jaquan Brisker.
Yeah, I like Brisker a lot too. To have him at number 4, could have put him in the top 3, but I just had Petre and Hill beat him by just a little bit. There's one play against Ohio State that I really love from him, where I think it's Trayvon Henderson. It might have been someone like that. One of the running backs. It pretty much is all the way to the house. He's going to score, has already beat the defense. And then you just see Brisker, all 15 feet tall of him, just cover 70 yards from the other side of the field, haul ass, and bring him down right before the end zone. And I just thought that was something that was like really impressive and caught my eye when I watched it. Obviously, the play is a net result for Ohio State. That's really good, but just to show the effort on that play and show his physicality to be able to do that, I thought was just really impressive and shows, what kind of player he is as a top 5 safety in this class for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that play up against Ohio State, because I completely forgot about that. I had screenshot it and I was going to share it. But yeah, he's over there and the play's going over here. And there's he couldn't have been further away. He might have been getting at the opposing pylon, and he still made that tackle. And that does check a lot of boxes for a lot of teams. Just, hey, that's heart. That's athleticism. That's closing speed. That's whatever you want to call it. So that was a fantastic one for sure. It's funny. I liked him a lot. And he kind of just moved up my rankings because I couldn't find a way to put him down. Like he's number 2 for me. He's so well-rounded. He plays the run game very, very well. I think not just going up and making a play on the ball carrier, but there isn't a wide receiver or tight end or some sort of, pulling tight end or whatever that can, he gets around them or through them. And some guys, I love watching them because they take on that, lead blocker or whatever and let somebody else make the play. But Brisker has a knack for making the play and, taking on the blocker and then also making the play on the football.
Yeah.
I think that really, really stood out to me. Again, he has a high-end athlete, tons of positional flexibility. I do worry a bit about his ability to either work like laterally or his agility. I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is, but there are a couple times I think in the film watching that just kind of he never was really picked on for this, but I had a bit of a concern about his ability to break from center field on routes that maybe like a post or a deep crosser that was kind of breaking across his face. And I thought that, no, like maybe he's a little bit slow there. Like he couldn't quite flip his hips and turn there. And then against Ohio State, they did that once and they didn't go to whoever that receiver was that time. They tried it later in the game and Olave went right across his face and beat him for a big touchdown. So I do worry about that. And in that same regard, that same, agility, nimbleness, whatever you want to call it, once some receivers are in the open field in front of him, I do worry about his ability to adjust to some wiggle guys with lateral movers in the open field. And the numbers do back that up. I think he's like 20th in a not good way in missed tackle rate against the pass. So that kind of worries me a little bit too. But I just think there's so much to like about him. There's so much that he can do well. I can see him doing more corner things than someone like Seen. So that's why I have him a little bit higher.
Yeah, he's definitely got some coverage issues that I think needs to be worked out. And that is kind of where I can see people saying like, oh, he's a box guy, but I think he has the ability and the skill set to do it. He's got the athletic traits to do it for sure. Again, somebody that I really like. So we got a couple people watching our show during the soccer game. We got somebody's on vacation in South America. You are awesome, man. Shout out to all of you guys. All right, let's wrap up the safety discussion here because like we said at the top a couple times with Nasir Adderley, it's a very interesting case. He's on the last year of his deal. Derwin James also playing on the last year of his deal, probably going to get an extension. So how the Chargers address the safety position is going to be very, very interesting in this draft because financially, like I don't know if they're going to be willing to pay both Adderley and Derwin James, high-end contracts. I don't think Adderley is going to be like a market set or anything like that. But I would imagine he gets a decently high contract. So, Tyler, what do you make of Adderley's situation, looking forward and how the Chargers can kind of address the safety position in the draft?
I mean, before free agency and before the acquisitions of Jackson and Mack, I was told that the only guys that were really safe were Asante Samuel Jr. and Derwin James. Nasir Adderley is not Brandon Staley's guy, and I think he improved quite a bit. He took a very, very nice leap forward for sure. If he does that again, he's going to be a great safety next to Derwin James. Absolutely. But you're right. He's got 1 year left. Same with Tranquil, but that's a whole different story. Nasir Adderley, I don't know what they would want from him. I guess it sort of depends on whether they were actually in on Tyrann Mathieu or not, because I'd sort of heard that Tyrann Mathieu, the situation was they didn't think he could still play in the box and go make tackles and be physical as he enters, year 3 of his new contract with whatever team he ends up going with. So, but Nasir Adderley feels different in that regard because I feel like he plays more back. So I think he played in run support really well. So I'm not really sure what they expect of him. To me, if they do want to move on from Adderley, it's because they just want something very different. And I think Adderley, we've always talked about him being, to be a slot corner or being able to do this or being able to do that. He's just only been a deep safety. And so if they want to move on from him, I think they would want to go for somebody that could just play more positions. Again, Dax Hill. Like, I don't think Lewis Seen would be in play in that regard. I'm not saying that's a 1-for-1 switch, but it's kind of like this similar player. Like, you're great in run support and you play deep, but Dax Hill, Jalen Peter, those guys can move all around. So I don't know. I think he's only got 1 year left on his deal. I wish he had 1 more year. Like, we really don't know with him because on the one hand, you see the step that he took forward, but then he isn't making a play on the football. Did he have he's had 1 interception his entire career with the Chargers so far, and it was a gimme ball from Drew Brees.
He dropped like 4 last year.
It felt like it. And again, like maybe that's just law of averages or something, a regression to whatever. Like maybe he gets 4 this year. Maybe he doesn't drop them, but I don't know if they're willing to wait that long. And I hope they're a bit proactive. But I will say Daxton Hill at 17 doesn't make me super happy.
Yeah, I think they're kind of in a tough spot. I would guess that they take a safety. Either they trade back in round 2, or that's kind of like a, late day 2, early day 3 type of pick. I don't think they're going to go in the first round unless they just get some tremendous value and Kyle Hamilton falls out of the sky like Derwin James 4 years ago. Although I don't think that's going to happen. The Adderley thing, the Adderley thing is interesting because I don't know. I don't know what his valuation would be on the market, and the Kaiser White contract, for example, makes me like skeptical of like how other teams just kind of view some of these Chargers players. I don't, he did also miss his rookie year, and so we just kind of don't know like what he is. Obviously, he could have the breakout season this year, and then suddenly we're talking about him in a very different way with 2023 free agency as a potential must resign, or maybe he, just goes past the Chargers pay grade, considering they just restructured the Mac deal and maybe they just won't have the money. But for me, I just kind of need to see more from Nasir Adderley at this point. I don't mind him, if you wanted to kind of extend him at like the current rate of what it would cost for a year or two, I wouldn't mind that as a stopgap. But I do think they kind of ultimately replace him in the same vein that we saw Kaiser White didn't end up being one of Brandon Staley's guys. I think that we kind of will see Nasir Adderley not being one of Brandon Staley's guys as well, like Tyler kind of insinuated earlier.
Yeah, I think Adderley is a good starter. I think he's a quality starter. I don't think he's necessarily played his way into like must resign like we thought Kaiser had last year. I guess it'll kind of depend on really what his market would be on the if he does hit free agency. And obviously what he does this season. But if he doesn't get any interceptions this year, then he's not going to have a strong market. Like that's just, a deep safety that doesn't get interceptions is not going to be a quality free agent signing. I mean, even if you look at Rayshawn Jenkins 2 years ago, Rayshawn had a good amount of interceptions, and granted he went to Jacksonville, who was just throwing money around like they always do.
Still doing
that. We'll always be doing that because that's why they are so bad. But Adderley is going to be a really interesting case study because I know Ronaldo Hill really likes him. We haven't really heard many of the other coaches talk very highly of him, but Ronaldo Hill all throughout the season was speaking very highly of Nasir Adderley and his ability to, be that high IQ player that they're hoping for. He said that he was the one that was always winning all the coverage quizzes. I forget they use a specific app for it, but I know Ronaldo Hill likes him. I don't know how Brandon Staley feels about him. I don't know how Tom Telesco feels about him at this point. So I guess the question really has to be asked is like, what does he have to do this season to really truly become like a must resign, obviously outside of the get more interceptions.
Yeah. I also just feel like they're kind of going to be tight on money anyway in terms of, and if you're already giving Derwin an extension, plus the cap hits that we've talked about for next year already, I just feel like that probably leaves Adderley outside of the picture unless, he doesn't get interceptions and, suddenly he's signing like a 1 year, $4 million deal or a 2 year, $8 million deal, whatever it is. I think his value would have to be pretty low, which is not what we want to see from him. We want to see a breakout season, but I think if he does have that, he's kind of well past the Chargers at this point if they're going to resign Derwin.
Yeah, I would at least just like to see them. Like, I really don't think they're going to upgrade over Nasir Adderley at this point, and all the options in free agency don't seem to be on the board for them at this point. So I would love for them to just go get somebody on day 3 who at least has some sort of athletic upside. You have Alohi Gilman, I think it was like a 3.8 RAS score. Mark
Shit,
Webb's
he was that low?
Yeah, Mark Webb's like a
Holy
6. And then Ben DeLuca is probably not that high either. So they need like anybody. If it's JT Woods because he's got a 9.8 or whatever it is, go for it. If it's Joey Blount, who they met with 9.87, just go find some sort of juice back there because you can't just keep trotting out guys that are like got a 6, which is way faster than way better than I could ever do. But in the NFL, like you can't.
Hey,
just
can you even bench press 225 50 times, bro?
48 maybe.
I don't do weights.
I don't. Alex is a long distance runner. But yeah, I think this is exactly why, the guys that you mentioned make a lot of sense, but this is exactly why I think they do need to get like a day 3 deep safety kind of player. Again, Verone McKinley, obviously who they've met with as well, I think would fit. And just give them insurance, give them some flexibility. And obviously, Alohi Gilman and Mark Webb's development are important to this conversation as well, because if they have options, then obviously they can allow Nasir Adderley to test the market and potentially be like Justin Jones, like Lorenzo McDaniels is saying, somebody that, hey, you go test the market, you can't find a deal, come back and we'll work something out, which is I think what happened with Justin Jones, and then he got the relatively big contract from Chicago. So I do think that we will see a safety picked at some point, and I'm hoping, like Tyler's saying, that it's an athletic deep safety with ball skills, just to give them that extra support, that extra flexibility back there.
Yeah, I would hope for the same, but if we hope for safety with great hips and great speed, we're going to get Larry Roundtree converted to safety at that rate. So
it's so weird to me, man. Like this team, like if you look at all their like first 3-round players, it's all high RES scores, and then all the day 3 guys, it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Even they take one with Neiman, they don't start him.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tyler, any final thoughts before we head out for the evening?
I'm going to go watch Verone Mckinley because I wasted quite a bit of time watching other guys that should not be in my top 10 or 12.
Yeah, he's somebody that I'm hoping to do like a profile on or a film breakdown or something on. So we'll see. Alex, final thoughts.
Back to doing the draft rankings. I think we're doing linebackers on Wednesday. Is that the deal? We'll figure out what position we're doing next, but happy to be doing these, and we'll get to every position and not do quarterbacks this year because we don't need to. But excited for all that.
Except for the Chargers are apparently enamored with some 7th round potential quarterback from I can't even remember where, but
James Madison.
James Madison. Yeah, that's right. Which is really just they're enamored with a 7th round quarterback. Like, what are we?
Well, Easton Stick is heading into the last year of his deal. We need to replace Easton Stick, so we need another guy who's not going to do anything.
I know. Just get an undrafted free agent for a camp arm. Like, what are we doing here? Anyways, that's a different conversation. So, we'll figure out what we're doing on Wednesday's show. It will be a draft ranking show unless the Chargers do something crazy and we do an emergency pod or something like that. But all signs for the Chargers are kind of headed towards doing the draft and then figuring out the rest of free agency after that. So hopefully not. Hopefully we get a couple more additions and we will talk about them if they happen. But Wednesday's show will be a draft focused episode, just like tonight. And if you are listening to this, please go leave us a rating or review on the podcast platform of your choice. If you are watching this and you are about finished, please like the show, subscribe. Don't be like Mr. Sato earlier, who was being a hater, and make sure and sub and be a cool, be a good person, I guess. All right, that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on Wednesday.